Whereas I really didn't like Survivor Series 1998. The funny thing is I actually kind of like Survivor Series 1999. Now, to be fair, I'm not a huge fan of the year 1999 when it comes to the WWF. It really wasn't that great of a year in my mind. I understand from somewhat of a rating standpoint and overall business standpoint, technically 99 was the best year during that time frame for the WWF and not 1998. But myself personally, I have always better enjoyed 1998 and the entire body of work, the things of consequence that happened, the quality of shows that we received. There were a lot of things for me to like about 1998, not so much 1999. Especially when I think back to WrestleMania 15, that was to me the epitome of pretty much a one-match show. But Survivor Series 1999 had a few different good things going on. I would definitely not classify this as a great show. But in terms of the maybe major pay-per-views in 1999, this was probably my favorite of the big four. Like SummerSlam, Royal Rumble, definitely, WrestleMania, but Survivor Series out of the big four for that year, like I said, it was my favorite. And some of the good things you had going on. You had a recently launched Kurt Angle character, and you're setting up this kind of parody American hero. Early Kurt Angle was freaking genius. What a gold character this guy was. And here you are, Big Four pay-per-view, gets a victory. Yes, it was against Stasiak, so what does that really mean? But again, it's a showcase piece for a guy that's going to be a future player for you with a legitimate amateur background that's growing into being a sports entertainer, if you will. So you had that going on. You get to see Moolah and Mae Young in this in a tag match, as short as it was, and as bad as it was. You still get to see Moolah and Mae Young. Don't get me wrong, though. The match itself was god-awful. Just boo-boo doo-doo. When you think of the worst Survivor Series matches of all time, this 8-woman tag definitely ranks up there. But like I said, looking back on it, through the scope of history, I don't have to get pissed off about this match because it was so short and was so shitty. But at least I get to see Moolah and Mae Young. So again, that's something positive to me. And then you've got China versus Chris Jericho for the Intercontinental Championship. And it's amazing to me with Jericho. Here's a guy that you bring him in August of 99 and you send him right at the Rock. And then SummerSlam, he does this whole thing, where he makes his appearance. But you debut him, you send him at the Rock, and then instantly the company backs off of him to the point now you bring in Jericho from WCW, and at Survivor Series 1999, he's doing the job to a woman. Now, granted, the woman was China. That's a little bit different. But still, Chris Jericho was jobbing to China in an Intercontinental Championship match. Just think about that for a second. To me, in some ways, that's a testament to the skills and abilities and the talent level overall of a Chris Jericho, that he would be able to overcome this and he would be able to make himself into a big star. Because a lot of lesser individuals would have been buried by this. They would have been to a point where they would have never been able to recover. But the funny thing is, this match between China and Jericho was pretty good. I don't know if I needed so much of Miss Kitty, mind you, but China Jericho, IC title match. A pretty solid IC title match. China beating Jericho? I don't know. Like I said, 3 months before, this guy's going after The Rock verbally on the mic, and now here he's jobbing out to China. I think this is one of these things where the WWF was trying to send a message, was trying to teach somebody that this is how they did business. They were trying to say, you might have a following, you have talent, but you're going to do things our way, and we're going to do it when we're ready for it. And I've always hated that. And that, to me, is what makes things so ridiculous when Jericho says that they don't intentionally sabotage people. Jericho, they intentionally sabotaged you in 1999. Thankfully, you were talented enough and good enough to get over enough to where the fans refused to allow you to get buried. That's why it was so ridiculous when Jericho said a little while back that the company doesn't intentionally sabotage people. They do it all the fucking time. And in fact, they did it with him. It was one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard said. And especially for somebody like him who should know better. You have Several traditional Survivor Series tag matches on this show. That's another good thing. You're keeping in tune with the traditional Survivor Series format, which you definitely didn't do with 1998, even though that tournament again had Survivor Series elements and a Survivor Series type feel to it, but it wasn't a traditional Survivor Series type of show. And you had several kind of traditional Survivor Series tag matches on here, and you look at the tag match, the one of the 4-on-4s. You got Too Cool and the Hollies going against Edge and Christian and the Hardy Boys. Again, when I look at the really good time periods in the history of this company, you see several common traits. You see big time talent at the top, big time talent in the middle, everybody doing interesting things, and then you have great depth and talent in the tag team division. And in this time, there was again great depth and talent in the tag team division. But of course, you've got even the tag title match, New Age Outlaws versus Al Snow and Mankind. This was a good, solid tag match. Again, just like with that 4-on-4 Survivor Series match, it speaks to the depth and level of talent that was in this tag team division. Again, part of the reason why this company was so good at this time was because of what they had at all levels of the card. It was like everybody had something to do. Everybody had some consequence. If they were going to be on TV, if they were going to be on pay-per-view, they mattered something. And that's important. And that's why this era was so good in large part, because everybody had a purpose. Everybody had a meaning. Everybody had a shtick. Everybody had a story. Everybody meant something, even if it was very little. Everybody meant something. And like I said, that shows and it matters when you go back and watch some of these old shows. The big interesting thing, of course, though, in the original build-up to this show was going to be the massive triple threat for the WWF Championship, featuring Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, and Triple H. And when you look at that on paper, no matter whether you've done that once or you've done that several times, this is a monster. This is a big time fucking feeling match. This is a type of money match, if you will. I stumbled over my words there for a second. Sorry. That you would expect out of a Big Four pay-per-view. Personally, I've never been the biggest fans of triple threat, in part because I think it's kind of a cowardly way out in some ways, and I also think it's a lot harder to tell an appropriate story with a title match, with a triple threat, as opposed to if you do one-on-one. But, this was an instance where, especially if it involved Austin, Triple H, and The Rock, you could deal with it, you could put up with it, because the talent level again and the performers involved and the different stories involved featuring Austin and Rock, Austin and Triple H and The Rock. I mean, This is great shit. But then, of course, this is at a period of time where Austin's neck is giving him problems. He's kind of broke down a little bit physically. Surely that's breaking down into other areas mentally, psychologically. And Austin needs time off. And he needs surgery. And it's got to be a scary time for the WWF because they don't know exactly how long Austin's going to be out. And here's a guy that by this time in 1999, the WWF is clearly supreme over WCW and ruling the wrestling landscape, even though both WCW and ECW are still around. It's going to be a scary time. It was Austin in a lot of ways that you built the Attitude Era on the back of, and now you're going to be out without that top guy for an extended period of time. It's a very scary time for the company, and a lot of things that could have been bad could have happened here. But it was interesting how they chose to write Austin off. They didn't have him wrestle here. They didn't have him sit there and do this or do that. They decide to have him appear at the pay-per-view, and then they do the big angle where he gets hit by the car, and bam, he's out of the equation. Now, I always wondered what the real plan was for who hit Austin with the car. Was it going to be Triple H hired Rikishi all along? I don't know if I buy that. I think this was one of these things they did it, and maybe the original plan was going to be Vince or Shane, or just that they did it and they figure it out later. I mean, it ended up working out really, really well, especially when you get to Survivor Series 2000 and you get to Triple H and Austin in their main event match. A classic stuff. But, now Austin's out of the way. What do? You've advertised and hyped up this triple threat that now is not happening. Well, it was interesting early on in the show that they had Big Show dominate in a 1-on-4 elimination match. He takes out his teammates, and then bam, he takes out Mideon, Viscera, and Prince Albert like nothing. And Boss Man says, I don't want none of this shit. And of course, this set up to the feud that was coming very soon between Boss Man and Big Show. With tears that are soaked, I'm sorry to hear that your dad finally croaked. Oh my god. Fucking incredible stuff. But here's Big Show. And in 1999, I always kind of thought WWF had a very civil type of booking relationship with Big Show. They bring him in at St. Valentine's Day Massacre, and here he's coming through the ring and he's helping Vince, but he throws Austin into the cage wall. Cage wall opens, Austin drops. He gets the title shot against The Rock at Mania. And then you've got the stuff that happens with Big Show at WrestleMania 15. What was it? He lost to Mankind. And they were just very, in my opinion, very kind of up and down, wishy-washy with how they booked this guy. Maybe, again, it was because he was WCW and they didn't want to give him too much too soon. I don't really know. They had him. They knew they got something, but they didn't know what they had. I don't know. But here was a point in time where they got something right with Big Show. You put him in there with a bunch of big dudes, but frankly, a bunch of big dudes that really, in the grand scheme of things, don't particularly matter all that much. You know, that's what you do. You put over Big Show like $1,000,000 fucking bucks. And that's exactly what they did. And they did a really good job of it. So now, no Austin in the main event. You got to have the triple threat, I guess. You want to do something else. Now, you bring the Big Show into the fold. I always found that interesting, that you had built it with Triple H, Austin, The Rock for the title at Survivor Series, and yet you take out Austin with the car running over incident, you insert the Big Show, and you have the Big Show win the belt here. That was always very interesting, but I think this was also emblematic of the times for the WWF in terms of they weren't really planning on or anticipating Austin going to have to be out for WrestleMania season in an extended period of time. And when you see the booking, in particular, of the main event scene in the next few months in the WWF, you could see that it kind of caught them by surprise, and they didn't really adjust all that well, because by the time you got to WrestleMania 2000, you've got this fatal four-way where it's about the fucking McMahons, it's not about the participants or the titles, and it's a bunch of drizzling bullshit. What's very interesting here, though, again, you bring in Big Show, you have this kind of Jekyll and Hyde Sybil type of relationship in the booking, but by the time you get to the end of the year, it's not even a year later after his debut with the company. And here is the former Giant from WCW holding your biggest belt at the end of the night. Interesting. You know, so you're making another new top star, basically, is what I'm saying. So that's a good thing. You had good tag matches, you had good quality of depth of the tag team division at this time. There's other interesting things to go back and see. You were featuring women prominently on the show as a big deal. You didn't have any Austin wrestling on this card. You had no Taker wrestling on this card. And I thought the WWE did a good job of trying to salvage a good show out of it. Like I said, is it great? No. Is it even all that particularly good? Maybe not. And maybe I'm just softening up a little bit on Survivor Series 1999. But now looking at it, it maybe isn't that bad of a show. There are a few matches that you can actually sit through and not feel like you wasted your time. And again, they were building up Kurt Angle. They had built up the Big Show. They were setting the table still for WrestleMania 2000, even though I don't think they were fully sure how they were going to get there. Again, a lot of good stuff that ultimately happened on the show.